The sound that changed everything came from under a child's bed. What police discovered there would reveal a truth no grandmother should ever face. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I stood outside my son's front door. Something felt terribly wrong. For 14 long days, I hadn't heard a single word from him. No phone calls. No text messages. Nothing. My son wasn't the type to vanish without saying goodbye. My name is Margaret, and I'm 61 years old. I live in a quiet town in the middle of America. This is my story about the worst 2 weeks of my life. It all started on a chilly morning in late October. I picked up my phone like I did every week to call my son Robert. The phone rang and rang, but nobody picked up. I heard his voicemail message and hung up. Maybe his phone died, I thought. Maybe he's just busy with work. I sent him a quick text. Hi honey, are you doing okay? The message never showed as delivered. That small detail made my stomach feel tight with worry. The next day I tried again. Still no answer. Then the day after that. And the day after that. Each time I called, my worry grew bigger and bigger, like a dark cloud filling up my chest. By the 5th day, I couldn't sit still anymore. I called at different times, early morning, late at night, during lunch. Every time, I got the same result. Silence. I started leaving voice messages. Robert, where are you? Please call your mother back. I'm getting scared. But those messages disappeared into emptiness, like they were swallowed by a black hole. My mind began imagining terrible things. Robert was a good son. He always called me once a week to tell me about his work and about my grandson, Tommy. Tommy was 8 years old and full of energy. They were everything to me. This silence wasn't normal. Something bad must have happened. On day 6, I decided to try his home phone. I dialed the number with trembling fingers, hoping to hear his voice or at least Tommy's cheerful hello. But the phone just kept ringing in what felt like an empty house. Nobody was there. I opened the app that Tommy used on his tablet and typed, "Sweet boy, where are you? Please message Grandma." The message was sent, but Tommy never read it. Tommy loved talking to me. He always replied right away with stories about school or his toys. This silence from him scared me even more. I started calling Robert's friends and the people he worked with. They all sounded confused. "I haven't seen Robert all week," one coworker said. "I thought he went on vacation." His best friend told me, "The last time we talked was 3 weeks ago. He said he was really busy with a big project at work." Nobody knew where my son was. The more people I asked, the more lost I felt. It was like Robert had disappeared into thin air. By day 10, I couldn't take the waiting anymore. I found phone numbers for Robert's neighbors and started calling them one by one. Most of them hadn't noticed anything unusual. But then an old woman who lived across the street said something that made my blood run cold. "Last week, during that big thunderstorm, I saw lights turning on and off in Robert's house real late at night," she explained. Her voice sounded worried. I thought maybe the boy was just going to bed, but it seemed strange. That thunderstorm, lights flashing on and off. Something terrible had happened that night. I could feel it in my bones. 2 full weeks passed with no word from my son. I barely slept. Every night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind running wild with scary thoughts. Had Robert been in an accident? Was he hurt somewhere? Did someone take him? But no, Robert would never abandon Tommy. That little boy was his whole world. And Tommy, where was my precious grandson? I made up my mind. I had to go to their house. I had to see for myself what was going on. Early the next morning, I caught the first bus heading to the city. The ride took almost 3 hours. I sat by the window the whole time, not saying a word to anyone. My ticket was crumpled in my shaking hands. When I finally got off at the bus station, the sun was starting to set. I walked as fast as my old legs could carry me toward the neighborhood where Robert lived. I had walked this same path dozens of times to visit them, but today every step felt heavy, like I was walking towards something horrible. I stood in front of their familiar brown door and knocked softly at first. Then I knocked harder. "Robert, Tommy," I called out, but my voice cracked. Nobody answered. Without really thinking, I reached for the doorknob and turned it. To my surprise, the door wasn't locked. It swung open with a creaky sound. My heart started beating so fast I thought it might explode. Robert always locked the door. Always. Especially when Tommy was home. He was very careful about safety. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside, holding my breath. What I saw inside made me freeze like a statue. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it. The couch was pushed away from its normal spot, like someone had shoved it during a fight. On the floor, I saw a broken coffee cup. The white pieces were scattered everywhere, mixed with a dark brown stain that had dried into the wood. I carefully stepped around the glass, my legs feeling weak and wobbly. In the kitchen, I found the water jug tipped over on its side. Several plastic water bottles were rolling around on the floor with their caps off, like someone had been desperately thirsty and drank them all in a hurry. The house smelled damp and felt too quiet. It gave me the creeps. I walked toward the stairs, feeling like I was carrying a heavy rock with each step. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I checked Robert's office first. Empty. Then his bedroom. Also empty. The bed was made, but everything felt wrong. The room had no life in it. Finally, I reached Tommy's bedroom. "Tommy, sweetheart, where are you?" I called out, but my voice sounded hoarse and scared. No answer came back to me. I stood in the middle of his room, looking at all his toys. His building blocks were scattered on the floor. His stuffed bear sat on the shelf. My heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. Suddenly, I heard a small noise coming from under the bed. It sounded like a plastic bottle rolling across the floor. I froze completely. A cold chill ran down my back. My heart started beating even faster, so fast I thought I might pass out. There was something or someone under that bed. I wanted to bend down and look, but my feet wouldn't move. I felt glued to the floor. I took a step backward, grabbing the edge of Tommy's desk to keep from falling. "Tommy?" I called again, my voice barely a whisper. Only silence answered me, except for that tiny scratching sound. Fear took over my whole body. I ran out of the house as fast as I could. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to try 3 times before I could dial the emergency number correctly. "My son is missing," I shouted into the phone, my voice breaking. "I haven't heard from him in 2 weeks, and there's a strange noise under my grandson's bed." The words tumbled out in a confused rush. I wasn't even sure what I was saying. I just knew I needed help, and I needed it fast. Within 10 minutes, I saw red and blue police lights flashing through the window. 2 officers got out of their car and followed me into the house. I led them up the stairs to Tommy's room, my finger shaking as I pointed at the bed. "Under there," I whispered, too scared to look myself. A tall young officer got down on his knees. "Is someone under this bed?" He called out in a firm, strong voice. The silence that followed was so thick and heavy. It was hard to breathe. Then, without saying anything else, both officers grabbed the bed frame and lifted it up in one quick motion. And there he was, Tommy, my grandson, curled up underneath the bed. He was so skinny. His hair was stuck to his head with sweat. His clothes were dirty and smelled sour. He was holding an empty water bottle in his thin arms. His eyes were open wide, but they looked empty, like he was staring at something far away that I couldn't see. I stood there, unable to move. I felt like my heart had stopped beating. The 2 police officers looked shocked too. Nobody could speak. I fell to my knees, wanting to hug him, but my hands were shaking too much. "Tommy, my sweet boy," I whispered as tears started falling down my face. He didn't respond. He just stayed there, clutching that empty bottle like his life depended on it. I didn't know what had happened, but I knew this nightmare was just beginning. At the hospital, one of the officers scooped Tommy up in his strong arms and carried him out of the house. I followed behind them like a ghost, unable to feel anything except fear and sadness. We rode in the police car with the siren wailing. I sat next to Tommy, trying to fan him with a piece of paper I found. I patted his back gently. "Grandma is here now," I kept whispering, but Tommy stayed as still as a statue. His eyes stayed open, but he wasn't really looking at anything. At the hospital, doctors and nurses rushed Tommy into a special emergency room. I stood outside with my hands pressed against the glass door, watching them work quickly around him. I could hear machines beeping and doctors talking fast. No injuries on the outside, but he's very thin and very thirsty. Signs of shock, I heard one doctor say. Every word felt like a knife in my heart. Shock, my 8-year-old grandson who always smiled like sunshine was now lying there looking like a dried leaf that might blow away. A little while later, a doctor let me come inside. Tommy was hooked up to a tube that went into his skinny arm. His eyes were still open, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at someplace far away. I took his cold little hand and called his name. "Tommy, it's me. It's Grandma. Wake up, please. Say something." The police officers came to the hospital with their notebooks full of questions. A serious-looking officer sat down next to me. "Ma'am, when was the last time you spoke to Robert?" I shook my head, feeling a lump in my throat. "2 weeks ago," I said, my voice shaking. "I tried calling him. I sent messages. I did everything I could think of, but there was nothing. Robert would never do this. He always called me at least once every week." The officer wrote everything down in his notebook, nodding. Then he turned to talk to the doctor about Tommy. They spoke in quiet voices, but I heard what they said. "The child isn't in danger of dying, but he's in deep shock from something very bad that happened." Hearing those words made me feel like a heavy stone was crushing my chest. Deep shock. What terrible thing did Tommy have to see to end up like this? The officer looked at me. "Ma'am, we're starting a missing person case for your son. Can you come to the police station to answer more questions?" I shook my head quickly. "Please let me stay with my grandson. I can't leave him alone right now." They agreed and said they understood, but I could see worry in their eyes, like they felt something dark and scary was hanging over my family. That night, I sat in the chair next to Tommy's bed, watching him sleep. But his sleep wasn't peaceful. He kept moving and twitching. He held onto that empty water bottle even while sleeping, like he was afraid someone would take it away from him. Sweat poured down his forehead, making his pillow wet. Sometimes he would suddenly sit up in bed with his eyes wide and full of fear, but he wouldn't make any sound. He would just stare at me with empty eyes. I would wipe his forehead with a cool cloth, my hand shaking. "Grandma is right here with you," I whispered over and over, even though I knew he couldn't hear me. The doctor came to check on him. She was a kind-looking woman with gentle eyes. She put her hand on my shoulder. "Ma'am, the boy needs time. He went through something very scary. Be patient with him. Eventually, he'll be ready to tell us what happened." I nodded, but inside I felt so heavy. Be patient? How could I be patient when Robert was still missing? When Tommy was lying here like a shadow of himself? I spent the whole night sitting there, holding Tommy's hand and listening to his quiet breathing. I thought about the last phone call I had with Robert. He sounded tired but tried to laugh anyway. "Mom, I'm fine. Work has just been really busy lately." I didn't know how busy or how serious it was. I didn't ask enough questions. Now I blamed myself. If I had paid closer attention, if I had visited sooner, would things be different? 2 days went by and I didn't leave Tommy's side. I felt like if I looked away for even 1 second, he might disappear. Tommy stayed small and fragile in that big hospital bed. A nurse gave him a soft teddy bear to hold, and he hugged it close. I tried to get him to eat some soup, bringing the spoon carefully to his mouth. "Eat, Tommy, sweetheart. You need to get strong so you can come home with Grandma." But the boy barely swallowed 2 tiny spoonfuls before he shut his mouth tight. His eyes just stared at the ceiling. Every single night was the same. Tommy had bad dreams. Sometimes he would sit straight up in bed with his mouth open like he wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I would hold him, rock him back and forth, and sing him the same lullaby I used to sing to Robert when he was a baby. But Tommy would just shake and tremble. Sweat covered his forehead, and I would wipe it away with a cloth. My hands shaking so much the cloth would fall. I asked the hospital to send someone to talk to Tommy. A young woman with a very sweet, kind voice came. She sat next to Tommy, held his hand gently, and asked him soft questions. "Tommy, do you want to tell me anything about your dad? Or about anything you saw?" But the boy just hugged his teddy bear tighter and stared at the floor. He wouldn't say a single word. I stood nearby, my heart in my throat. "Will he ever talk again, doctor?" I asked, almost begging. The kind woman looked at me with understanding in her eyes. "Ma'am, he needs time. What happened shocked him badly. But I promise, he will open up when he's ready." I nodded, but inside I couldn't feel calm. Time? I didn't know how much more time I could wait. Robert was still missing, and every day felt like torture. On the morning of the 3rd day, I was washing Tommy's face with a soft, damp cloth. I tried to smile and told him an old story about Robert when he was a little boy. "Your dad was so silly when he was young, Tommy," I said gently. "Once he accidentally broke my favorite vase and tried to glue it back together. He thought I wouldn't notice." I gave a small laugh. "But your dad loved you more than anything in the whole world." Tommy didn't answer, but I saw his little fingers squeeze the teddy bear tighter, like he was holding on to something important. I was about to tell another story when my phone started buzzing in my purse. The screen showed it was the police station calling. My heart started pounding hard. A bad feeling washed over me like cold water. I answered, and my hand shook so much I almost dropped the phone. The detective's voice on the other end sounded very serious. "Mrs. Margaret, I need you to prepare yourself for some bad news. We just tested Robert's house with special chemicals that show blood, and we found a very large amount in the living room." My ears went numb. The world seemed to go silent around me. The cloth in my hand fell to the floor. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. "Blood?" I repeated, my voice breaking into pieces. The detective kept talking, and every word felt like a knife stabbing my heart. "It's very likely we're dealing with a murder. We've closed off the house as a crime scene. We're waiting for DNA test results to be sure." I was trying to understand his words, but they didn't make sense. Then Tommy suddenly pulled hard on my sleeve. I turned and saw his eyes were red and full of tears, like he had heard everything the detective said. And then, after so many days of complete silence, Tommy burst into tears. He cried so hard and so loud that it filled the entire hospital room. "Dad, he's dead," he screamed. His voice was weak, but full of so much pain that it felt like the whole world was breaking. I fell back into my chair and hugged him with all my strength. Tears poured down my face. "No, Tommy. No, it's not like that," I told him. But I didn't even believe my own words. His crying tore my heart into pieces. The detective heard Tommy's screams through the phone. He said quickly, "Ma'am, Please try to stay calm. We're coming to the hospital right now to talk to Tommy. Please don't go anywhere. I couldn't answer. I just kept holding Tommy tight, letting my tears soak into his hospital gown. Nurses and doctors rushed into the room, probably because they heard the crying. A young nurse knelt down and put her hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Margaret, please try to stay calm. Let us help. But I shook my head, holding Tommy even tighter. No, I have to be here with him. I can't leave him, I said, my voice all choked up. The doctor checked Tommy and gave him some medicine to help him calm down. Slowly his crying got quieter, but his eyes stayed red. He looked at me with so much pain that I couldn't fix. I stroked his hair softly. Grandma is right here, Tommy. I'm not going anywhere. But inside, I felt like I was falling down a deep, dark hole. If Robert was really... I couldn't even think the word. My mind wouldn't let me dot about an hour after the detective's phone call. 2 officers arrived at the hospital. They had a small recording device and a notebook. The tall, thin officer sat down next to Tommy's bed and spoke in a soft but careful voice. Tommy, can you tell us and your grandma what happened that night? I felt Tommy's whole body go stiff in my arms. His thin shoulders tensed up. He looked down at the floor, holding his teddy bear so tight his knuckles turned white. I stroked his hair. It's okay, Tommy. Just tell us what you remember. Grandma is right here with you. I tried to make my voice sound calm and safe, but inside I was terrified. I was scared of what he might say, but I needed to know the truth. No matter how much it hurt after what felt like forever, Tommy gave a tiny nod. It was such a small movement that it broke my heart. I held my breath and listened to every word that came out of his mouth. His voice was weak and broken, like each word was a piece of his soul falling apart. That night, it was raining really, really hard, Tommy began. His voice was barely louder than a whisper. I was playing with my building blocks in my room, making a super tall tower. Dad said it was the prettiest tower he'd ever seen. Tommy stopped for a moment, staring at his teddy bear. He squeezed it even tighter. Then the doorbell rang a bunch of times. It kept ringing and ringing. I got curious, so I went to see who it was. Dad was standing at the door, looking through the little window. His face looked really scared. I'd never seen Dad look like that before. A cold feeling went through me. Robert was always calm. He knew how to hide his worries to protect Tommy. What could have scared him so much? Tommy's voice got even quieter. Dad turned around and saw me standing there. He ran over to me real fast and got down on his knees. He whispered, Tommy, get under your bed right now. Don't come out until I tell you it's okay. Do you understand? Tommy's voice cracked. I was scared, but Dad pushed me toward my room. He was in a hurry. I crawled under my bed, and Dad even pulled the blanket down to hide me so nobody could see me. I could picture my little grandson, only 8 years old, hiding under his bed in the dark, not knowing what was happening. My heart felt like it was tearing in half. Through a tiny gap in the blanket, Tommy continued, I saw Mum come into the house. There was a really tall man with her. His face looked mean and cold. He didn't say anything. He just stood there with his arms crossed behind Mom. I froze completely. Jennifer, Tommy's mom, Robert's ex-wife. I never thought she would come back. She wasn't supposed to come back after everything that happened. Tommy started shaking and his voice broke even more. Mom looked all around my room. She asked, Where is Tommy? I got so scared. I thought she was going to find me. But Dad told her in a calm voice. He went to stay with his grandma for winter break. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Robert lied to protect Tommy. He knew something bad was about to happen. I knew Dad was lying, Tommy whispered, but I didn't move. I was too scared. The police officer kept writing in his notebook. His face looked serious, and I saw his hand stop for a second when Tommy kept talking. Then Mom started yelling at Dad. She was asking him for money. She said something about Dad owing her money, and that he had to pay her, or there would be trouble. But Dad shook his head. He said no. He told her she had done enough bad things already, and that she needed to leave him alone. Hearing this broke my soul into pieces. Robert had been trying so hard to escape Jennifer's shadow. He was trying to build a new, safe life for himself and Tommy. But she came back, bringing danger with her. Tommy stopped. He was breathing hard, like the memory was pulling him back to that terrible night. I rubbed his back gently. "Take your time, sweetheart. Grandma is right here." The boy took a deep, shaky breath and kept going. Dad and Mom and the tall man started fighting really bad. Mum was screaming really loud and the tall man got closer to Dad. He said something that sounded like a threat. I couldn't hear all the words, but I saw him push Dad hard. Tommy's whole body started shaking. He buried his face in my chest and started crying again. Dad stumbled backward. Then the man pushed him even harder. Dad fell down and hit his head on the corner of the table. There was a really loud bang. Then I saw red stuff start coming out of Dad's head. Dad wasn't moving anymore. Tommy shook so hard I thought he might break. He hid his face and sobbed. I saw Dad lying there and he wasn't moving at all. I wanted to come out. I wanted to call him, but I was too scared. I was so scared, Grandma. I hugged him as tight as I could. My tears soaked into his hair. The picture of Robert falling down kept playing in my mind like a horrible nightmare that wouldn't stop. The police officer in front of me stopped writing. He looked at me with sad, understanding eyes. "This statement is very important, Mrs. Margaret," he said in a serious voice. "We're going to investigate this as a murder case. Tommy has been very, very brave." I nodded, but inside I felt completely empty. Nothing could fill the hole in my heart. Tommy kept crying, and his sobs felt like knives stabbing me over and over. I looked at the officer. "Are you going to find her? Jennifer and that man?" He nodded firmly. "We will do everything we can, Mrs. Margaret. I give you my word." After the police left, I stayed there holding Tommy close. I felt the dark shadow of this tragedy falling over my family, and I didn't know if we would ever escape it. Memories that night, after the officers left, I couldn't close my eyes even for a minute. Tommy's quiet sobs filled the room like sad music. He kept moving his lips in his sleep, calling for his dad. His voice was so faint I had to lean close to hear him. Every time he called out, I would gently wipe his face with a warm cloth, hoping to ease even a little bit of his pain. But when I touched his cold skin, old memories came flooding back, hurting like someone was pouring salt on a wound that never healed. I remembered Robert when he was in his 20s. He was just starting his career, and his eyes were full of hope for the future. I remembered how proud he looked when he brought Jennifer home to meet me. "Mum, this is Jennifer," he said with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. "She's going to be my wife." Jennifer back then was a sweet girl. She was a little clumsy and shy, but she always tried hard to do things right. I taught her how to cook some of my recipes, and she would blush and smile. I remember thinking, yes, this girl is good for my son. She'll make him happy. Our whole family loved her. She had such a warm smile, and the way she looked at Robert made it clear he was her whole world. Then Tommy was born, and it felt like a bright new light had been turned on in our lives. I still remember the first day I held him. He was wrapped in a soft blue blanket, his tiny eyes looking up at me, and he gave me the sweetest little smile. The neighbors would joke with me. "Mrs. Margaret, you look 10 years younger," they'd say, and I would laugh because it was true. My heart was full of happiness. Robert and Jennifer seemed happy then. They visited me often, bringing Tommy and telling me stories about their new life together. I thought it would always be this way, that our small family would always be full of laughter and love. But then everything started falling apart. The gambling problem, I remember the day I got a phone call from Robert. His voice sounded flat and tired, so different from usual. "Mum, Jennifer has gotten into some gambling trouble." I froze. I couldn't believe it. That sweet girl who used to help me in the kitchen had fallen into something so dangerous. The first time it happened, Robert quietly sold the car he loved. It was the car he had saved up money for years to buy. I saw him sitting in my backyard, his eyes red from crying, but he still tried to smile. "Mom, I'll be okay. I just want to help her get better." I took his hand, wanting to say something to comfort him, but I stayed quiet. I understood that Robert loved Jennifer so much he was willing to give up anything to save her. But the problems didn't stop. They just got worse. The second time, men who lent money came knocking on my door. They made threats because Jennifer couldn't pay them back. I had to take out all the money I had been saving for when I got old. It was everything I had, but I didn't think twice about it. I just wanted to protect my family. "Mum, I'm so sorry," Robert told me that night, his voice choking with tears. I never thought things would get this bad. I hugged him and told him not to worry, that families help each other. But deep inside, I started feeling scared. Jennifer wasn't the same good girl anymore. Every day she was changing, becoming someone I didn't recognize. Jennifer became angry all the time. She would break dishes over tiny things. I remember visiting once and seeing Tommy huddled in a corner with red eyes, because his mom had yelled at him just for spilling some milk. Jennifer was there, screaming at him, "You're just as clumsy as your father." I rushed over and pulled Tommy away, trying to calm Jennifer down. But she just laughed in a mean way. "He's my son. I know how to raise him." Those words stabbed my heart like a knife. Tommy didn't deserve to live with all that anger and yelling. I looked at Robert, and I saw how tired he was. His eyes that used to shine with happiness now only showed exhaustion and sadness. Many nights, Robert would call me crying. "Mom, I can't take it anymore. Jennifer isn't the woman I fell in love with. I'm afraid she's going to hurt Tommy." Hearing him say that broke my heart, but all I could do was comfort him. "Son, if you need me, I'm always here for you. I'll help you however I can." Finally, Robert decided to divorce Jennifer and fight for custody of Tommy. The day the judge made the decision, I saw Robert let out a huge sigh of relief, like a heavy weight had been lifted off his shoulders. I felt the same way too. I thought that finally, Robert and Tommy would have a peaceful, quiet life. I thought Tommy would grow up with his father's love, without any more shouting or fear. But I was so wrong. Just 6 months later, Jennifer came back. And this time, she brought an even bigger nightmare with her. New information. The next morning, sunlight came through the hospital window, but it couldn't warm up the coldness I felt inside. I sat next to Tommy, watching him sleep peacefully after the medicine. His small face looked calmer, but the pain was still there, impossible to erase. My phone buzzed. It was another call from the police station. The detective's voice was serious but firm. "Mrs. Margaret, we have some new information. Can you come to the station right away?" I nodded even though he couldn't see me. I whispered to Tommy, who was still sleeping, "Grandma will be back soon, sweetheart. Be good." I asked the kind young nurse I had gotten to know to watch over Tommy, and then I rushed out of the hospital. My mind was spinning with confused thoughts. On the bus ride to the police station, I stared out the window, but I didn't really see anything. All I could see in my mind was the image of Robert falling that Tommy had described. I held my scarf tightly in my hands, trying to hold back tears. When I walked into the meeting room at the station, the lead detective was waiting for me. He was a middle-aged man with sharp, serious eyes. He spread out a big map on the table and pointed to several red dots marked around Robert's house. "We have a new clue," he said confidently. A neighbor's security camera recorded a suspicious truck on the night of the storm. I held my breath. My heart was pounding. He played a video on the screen. The picture was blurry and shaky because the camera wasn't very good quality, but I could still clearly see a dark-colored truck parked in front of Robert's house. Under the dim streetlight, I could see the shape of something long in the back, covered with a big sheet.